Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode. The NBA season is starting to wind down. We could only have two more possible games left. By the time I'm recording, this is the day before Game 6 of the NBA Finals. And if there were to be a Game 7, it would be on Sunday. But we have the draft in a week from today. We've seen a lot more off-season stuff happen. We had the Desmond Bane trade. We see KD rumors start to heat up. We see Giannis rumors about a possible trade kind of go ghost. But this episode is going to be kind of just recapping, going into the offseason, talking about some rumors, some trades, what some teams could possibly be looking to do this offseason. And then I will also be having my final mock draft come out this weekend. There'll be the final one. It'll be my fourth mock draft that I've done this year on this year's draft. The draft is next Wednesday. And from the looks of it, we have been seeing reports that a Kevin Durant trade could happen within the next couple of days before the draft. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this weekend turns out going into next week's draft. But to start out, we did get our first blockbuster trade of the offseason. Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic. The details of the trade were Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic. Grizzlies received KCP, Cole Anthony, the 16th overall pick in this year's draft, 2026 first-round pick via Phoenix, 2028 first-round pick unprotected, a 2029 first-round pick swap, and a 2030 first-round pick unprotected. So, caught the world by surprise. Nobody even thought Desmond Bane was somebody that would be on the market. It looked going into this offseason like the Grizzlies were going to look to shake up this roster and maybe go in somewhat of a different direction. We've seen the Ja trade rumors kind of float around a little bit the past two off seasons, but this was shocking for sure. But talking about the Orlando Magic side of things, I love it. I love this from the Orlando Magic's perspective because, yes, did you give up a lot for Desmond Bane and somebody of his caliber? Yes, you did. 4 first-round picks, one of them could be a very valuable pick in Phoenix, and then Cole Anthony, KCP, you're not losing sleep over either one of those guys, but it's more so the draft capital I'm seeing in this trade. But this is the perfect fit. It's the perfect. They couldn't have got a better fitting piece for this roster that made sense and was able for them to go get. Because you're looking at the landscape of the NBA right now. A lot of it is matchup hunting, matchup based in the playoffs. And the guys that they could have been rumored to go getting, Anthony Simons, Jordan Poole, guys of those caliber, would have definitely impacted their defense. But in Desmond Bane, you're getting a 3-level scorer, somebody who's not going to negatively impact your defense, and somebody that's going to be able to fit seamlessly in the backcourt with Jalen Suggs. And he has shown in growth in his game over there in Memphis to be able to be a primary point guard at times, be the lead initiator at times. So the core lineup you have now in the top 4 is Suggs, Bane, Wagner, and Banchero. Like, with how wide open the Eastern Conference is projecting to be next year, this trade boosts the Orlando Magic up to another level. Because he is a 3-level scorer that can handle, create, play make, and he doesn't hurt your defense. And in this trade, you're able to keep somebody like Jalen Suggs. Anthony Black, you can still have come off your bench. So, like, this doesn't hurt your depth a whole lot as well. You're giving up the 16th overall pick, which I'm not really losing sleep over because they have a ton of young talent on this roster, and a Jet Howard, Tristan Da Silva, that they still need to find minutes for in their rotation. Interested to see what they do with guys like Mo Wagner going into this offseason. I do wonder what they're going to do with guys like Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter, because that contract's kind of looking a little bit questionable at this current point in time. But in my opinion, Desmond Bane to the Magic puts them on another level in the Eastern Conference. I thought that the Orlando Magic were always a very sneaky team out east, depending on what they did this offseason going into next year, but with how wide open it's projecting to be in the Eastern Conference next year, I think the Orlando Magic put themselves to where I think they could be a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference next year, depending on what else they do this offseason. I think they're going to be a little bit more quiet, but Desmond Bane is a perfect fit for what the Orlando Magic want to do going into next year, and I'm glad they went this route over getting somebody like Anthony Simons, Jordan Poole, something like that. I think Desmond Bane is the perfect piece for this team. But getting into the Grizzlies side of things, I don't hate this at all. You're getting a haul, probably the best package you're ever going to get for somebody like Desmond Bane. KCP, Cole Anthony, really good salary filler, and also just really good pieces to have on this team going forward. KCP is somebody that they don't really have. They haven't really had a wing defender that can just spot up in space. They've had some shooting in like Luke Kennard, but he's not KCP's a way better defender than somebody like Luke Kennard. So, and he's good salary filler for a lot of contending teams that would want KCP. So looking at that, like that trade, he can recoup some of his value over there in Memphis playing with a point guard like John Morant. Cole Anthony could be a nice scoring punch for you off that bench as well. You're adding the 16th overall pick in this year's draft, which I'm perfectly fine with. I think they could use a draft pick this year to maybe try to hit on some talent. The 2026 first round picks from Phoenix is very interesting because a lot of like ideas and discussions were about, are they going to try to pivot to go get somebody like Kevin Durant? I don't really think that's in their best interest because I think they need a little bit more depth. I think they're having a little bit of a depth problem. They didn't get the jumps from Vince Williams, G.G. Jackson that they were assuming they would get. Jaren Jackson Jr. is still great. Zach Edey, I feel like his transition to the NBA had some growing pains for sure. I still think he's going to be really, really good. But this comes down to John Morant. This team goes as far as John Morant can take them. And I think a lot of the off-court stuff has kind of took Memphis off the path. And then firing Taylor Jenkins as well, I think is very questioning and concerning, to where I always went into this offseason thinking that they were going to reshuffle this roster. But the Memphis Grizzlies, I think, got away from this trade, adding some draft capital and some very tradable contracts. And I feel like with Desmond Bane and John Morant in the backcourt together, with how much money Jaren Jackson's projected to make and John Morant's making and Desmond Bane's making, I feel like this team always has somewhat of a ceiling, with that being the big three, especially out west. So I think pivoting, getting a lot of draft capital for Desmond Bane, getting a first-round pick in this year's draft, and some flippable contracts, I think sets this team up to have more open salary later down the line. But I think they definitely need to figure out what they're doing with John Morant. I feel like those rumors are going to start circling up again as well. And they got to pay Triple J, so who knows what route they're going in. This seems like a big-time move for a team in the Western Conference that might be looking to take a little bit of a step back to take a big step forward in the next couple of years. But I love the draft capital they got in this trade. I think this is a very big win-win trade for both sides, because Memphis has the ceiling and did have a ceiling with Bane, Ja, Triple J being their big three out west. And then the Magic getting Desmond Bane, which I think is the perfect fitting piece to go alongside Paolo, Franz, Jalen Suggs. Interested to see what else they can do to add this offseason for the Magic. I want to see them maybe add a little bit more shooting on top of Desmond Bane. Maybe somebody like Sam Merrill, somebody they can get from Cleveland. But now they're going to be a team where they're going to pay Paolo Banchero the extension. So it's going to be very interesting to see what direction this team ends up going in. But in my opinion, I think the Orlando Magic set themselves up great for next year in a wide open Eastern Conference to be a top 4 to 5 team out East with a real shot at making some noise next year in the playoffs. But going on to next topic is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Those rumors about him being traded have kind of gone silent. It seems less and less likely that's going to happen. The only teams that have a real deal package for Milwaukee would be like the San Antonio Spurs with the number 2 overall pick and Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, or the Houston Rockets. Those are the only 2 teams that I think have a big enough package to sway the Milwaukee Bucks into trading somebody like Giannis. The only other team will be the OKC Thunder, but they're about to win the NBA title. They're not moving off of anybody. But those are the only 2 teams realistically that could use somebody like Giannis, that have the package to go and get somebody of his caliber. This is a top 3 player in basketball. Like, this isn't like we just saw what Desmond Bane went for. He went for 5 first-round picks, including this year's. So what do you think Giannis is going to go for? Giannis is going to go through 2 to 3 young, high upside players plus 5, 6 first-round draft picks. This is a top 3 player in the world. So the asking price, especially for somebody like Giannis, who is homegrown in Milwaukee, they really don't want to trade him. It doesn't seem like he really wants to leave there as well, but he is putting pressure on the front office to kind of reshuffle this roster and run it back. Like, if you're the Bucks, you do have a couple avenues to get this roster better. Brook Lopez, sign and trade. Bobby Portis could opt out or opt in to his deal. Do a sign and trade of Bobby Portis' caliber. He could get you a better fitting piece, more youth on this team. Between him and Brook Lopez, I feel like this team just kind of aged out, especially with Chris Mills, and this core just kind of aged out. So looking at that, they have avenues to flip and get some more young talent in the door, which is what I think Milwaukee needs to do. They haven't really been good in the draft, hitting on draft picks in the past couple of years. Their roster got a lot older. Bringing in Doc Rivers, I wasn't the biggest fan of that. But now, looking at what you have a kind of a bad Kyle Kuzma contract on your roster. Don't know how much they'll be able to do with that if they're able to flip it and get off of it. Maybe get somebody that just fits your team better. But they, I think, are not in the worst position that you would think, right? They're like this Phoenix Suns of the Eastern Conference because there's a lot on this roster that doesn't fit right now, and they're older. So they need to go into this offseason looking to say goodbye to Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis. You have Damian Lillard, who has Achilles, but at some point you're going to get Damian Lillard back at the back half of next year. So maybe you can get enough to stay afloat. Like you said, you still have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Maybe you can get into this year's draft. Like, there's avenues for this Milwaukee Bucks team this offseason. Now it's going to be a lot of pressure on the front office, which their GM just got extended. So this seems to be like a situation where they're going to keep Giannis, reshuffle this roster, and try to run it back. Because like I said, the Eastern Conference is very wide open, and you have somebody of Giannis Antetokounmpo's caliber. You just need to find a way to put the pieces together around him. Now, I've heard rumors and discussions about Chris Middleton opting out of his deal and going back to Milwaukee, and that would be a big plus and a positive because he's somebody that fits well with Giannis. Yes, he is on the older side and has his injury concerns, but I feel like now more time removed from that surgery that he had last offseason, I think he'll be better going forward. But looking at what they need to just add some youth. They need to add some more young talent to get up and down, put more athletes around Giannis Antetokounmpo. Who knows, Pat Connaughton's probably going to opt into his deal. Hopefully, maybe they can try to package those contracts up together and try to get somebody in the door that can help Giannis and kind of cushion the blow. But if they can, it could be a crazy idea. But if Chris Middleton does opt out and goes back to Milwaukee, which is kind of something that I feel like has built some steam, that could be very interesting because he's somebody that obviously Milwaukee ties want to chip there, like seamless fit, right? So I think it's going to be super interesting to see what direction Milwaukee goes in this offseason, but I'm to the point now where I don't expect Giannis to get traded. Top 3 player in the world, wide open Eastern Conference, and if you're Giannis, why not stay? I mean, even if you got sent into the Western Conference and traded to the Western Conference, you know how tough it is out west? Like, there's going to be 50-plus win teams that are fighting to get out of the play-in, like, next year in the Western Conference. So, like, if you're Giannis, I definitely want to stay in the Eastern Conference going into next year. That it's the easiest path to a finals without Boston being there. We don't know what Cleveland's going to do, with this roster going into next year. So looking at that, I think the Milwaukee Bucks are smart to run it back and not trade Giannis, but there are some packages to where I would at least consider. I would at least consider trading him. The Spurs have an interesting one of, say you get number 2, that's Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle. That's your backcourt for the future already, and you're kind of kickstarting this rebuild very quickly. Even the Rockets getting like somebody like Sengun, somebody you can build around, or like maybe somebody like Jalen Green, maybe Sengun and Jalen Green. Those are 2 nice building block pieces to build around. Even whatever you think about Jalen Green and Sengun, I think those are quick rebuild kickstarts from the Spurs and the Rockets that the Bucks could use to make this rebuild not as long as it possibly could be. But I think they're doing the right thing. I think we're still maybe a year or 2 away from something like a Giannis trade, but his value is high. And if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you have to address every request for Giannis just to see what they're offering. I think it would be a disservice to your franchise going forward if you weren't at least open-minded to the idea of trading somebody like Giannis, because there are some great packages out there if you're the Milwaukee Bucks that could really kickstart a rebuild and make this rebuild process a lot quicker than people would think post Giannis. But my mindset is that he's going to be on the Milwaukee Bucks going into next year, and they're going to reshuffle this roster as well as they can this offseason to compete for a title next year as well. Next, Kevin Durant. This is a very interesting one as well because the teams that I think have the best shot are the same teams I think have the best shot at Giannis. San Antonio and the Houston Rockets. Toronto could be a sleeper team. Toronto has a couple interesting pieces that Phoenix could want to kind of stay afloat because they don't want to go back into a rebuild process. Devin Booker has already made that very clear that he doesn't want to enter a rebuild process as well. Again, he wants to compete and try to win in the Western Conference. So Toronto has a very Like, if you're looking at somebody like RJ Barrett, maybe they move off of Brandon Ingram if they can get Kevin Durant, Emmanuel quickly. They have some stuff. Jakob Poeltl can give the Phoenix Suns a center going forward. Like, they have a lot of interesting pieces I think the Phoenix Suns would want. But it comes down to if Toronto is willing to pull the trigger. They're kind of like a sleeping giant. They have good packages and bigger contracts of quality NBA players to make teams start to think about it, make them start to be more active in a lot of these discussions when it comes to Giannis, Kevin Durant, trades of that nature. So, in my opinion, I think the best fit for KD is the Rockets, because you got to think, if you're the Spurs, you don't have to give up number 2 to get Kevin Durant, so you can have Dylan Harper still, and then you're adding Kevin Durant because you have such draft capital and some young talent to make contracts work, to where you don't have to give up the bag to go get Kevin Durant. And I don't think the Rockets have to give up the bag to get Kevin Durant either, because he's on an expiring and he's older. But I like the Rockets fit a little bit better because they need Kevin Durant, like somebody of his skill set, somebody that can space and be their go-to guy, and you're surrounding him with a Sengun, a Men Thompson, Tari Eason, Dylan Brooks, who knows what you do with Fred VanVleet going down the line. So, like, looking at that, I like the fit with Houston. And if you're the Spurs, it might be a little premature, like, to go after somebody like Kevin Durant, because I think it might be a hot take for me to say, but I think the Rockets are closer to really competing in the West with what they have on their roster already than the Spurs are. I know the Spurs have Wemby and De'Aaron Fox already. They have the number 2 overall pick. They have pick 14. And they have some young, interesting pieces on the roster. But I think the Rockets are in a further along position than the Spurs are, in my opinion, because you have a championship-level coach in Ime Udoka. You've already been into the playoffs. You've already kind of thrown this young core into the fire into the playoffs against a veteran Warriors team this past year. So, like, you have a little bit more going for you. You kind of know a lot of the questions that San Antonio has about their roster compared to the Rockets. I feel like they have a little bit more figured out. They kind of know exactly who they are and what direction they're going in. And you're surrounding Kevin Durant with a ton of athleticism, a ton of great defensive players, to where I think Houston would be fine re-upping Kevin Durant for like 2 more years after this one to get the rest of Kevin Durant's career in Houston. And I just think they're in a better position going forward than the Spurs. Yes, the Spurs have Wemby and Fox, but I still think the depth is in question. I still think there's a lot of question marks on, like, just this roster, head coach. I think the Rockets' Ime Udoka is a way better coach than the San Antonio Spurs do currently, looking at what they have. So looking at this, I think the Rockets are in a way better position to go and acquire Kevin Durant. And I think they have better pieces going forward for the Suns that the Suns would want. I know they just re-signed Steven Adams, but maybe you can go get Jabari Smith Jr. and Jalen Green, and you flip those two, and then the Suns can flip Jalen Green to a third team. They're getting something back for Jalen Green, maybe a big of some sort. So something like that, I think, would put the Rockets in a way better position. But it's still the Western Conference, and I think either one of these teams getting Kevin Durant would still make the Western Conference tough for sure. But if you're the Suns, you don't really have the leverage. So, like, you're looking at this like, man, like, they got to make a move. They got to make something happen. They got to shake up this roster to still look to compete. In my opinion, I think Kevin Durant will be traded possibly a day before the draft. That's just where it's trending. That's where it's looking. That's where the rumors are kind of circling of Kevin Durant being moved possibly like a day or 2 before the draft, or possibly this weekend. But I think I would be shocked if it was any other team other than the Spurs and the Rockets. The Timberwolves one is interesting, but it's like Kevin Durant isn't interested in going there. Minnesota's interested in getting Kevin Durant, so it's like where it's kind of like which side is going to show their cards first. But, like, I like the fit with him in Minnesota, him next to Anthony Edwards. I think they both need each other at this point in their careers right now. But if he's not interested, I'm like, if you're Phoenix, do you really care? If the Minnesota Timberwolves offer you a good enough package, maybe somebody like Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, like, if you're Phoenix, why would you care? Like I'm not saying Kevin Durant isn't a great player, but Kevin Durant, what has he done for your franchise, right? So it's like, yes, it's good on your organization and your respect from other than like players to send Kevin Durant to a situation where he wants to go to. But if you're them and Minnesota Timberwolves are offering you Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle, or like DiVincenzo and Rudy Gobert, that could solve a lot of your problems off the rip, and you're still able to compete in the Western Conference at a high enough level with Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, DiVincenzo, Rudy Gobert, or Julius Randle, depending on whatever they want to go with that situation. Like, I like that. If you're the Suns, I think that gives you the best out of the Spurs, Rockets, and Minnesota Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves give you the best win-now players for your roster that you need. You need a big. You need another swing guard that in Dante DiVincenzo who can space and do a bunch of different things for you. So, like, I think the Timberwolves have the best win-now player package for sure. I think the Rockets give you an interesting upside piece in like Jabari Smith, like Reed Shepard, flipping Jalen Green to a third team. That can get you the big that you want. Like the Spurs, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, maybe pick 14, so you would have 2 first-round picks. Like another interesting one is there. Like, but I think if there was a team that Kevin Durant would go to, I would love to see him with Minnesota, but the reports are seeming like that's not his interest. So I'm looking at Houston or the San Antonio Spurs for trade destinations for Kevin Durant. Now going into the next one, New York. Man, for a great season that New York had, getting to the conference finals for the first time in so long, it seems like if you just told somebody who didn't watch the playoffs and you were going through like what the Knicks have done so far, like right after they got eliminated, you'd be like, man, did they get like swept in the first round? Like very disappointing season. No, this is a very successful season for the New York Knicks. It's just how they have handled this Tom Thibodeau situation has been super sloppy and super messy. Now, Tom Thibodeau, great coach. Do I think it was his time to go? I think he reached his peak and his heights in New York. I think New York needs a different coach for this specific team with Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. Now, New York had no plan, obviously. They fired Tibbs. You would think if they had this mindset of firing him, they've already thought about this no matter where they went, unless they won the title this year, like they were firing Tibbs. So, looking at this, I hate how sloppy this process has been with the Tom Thibodeau firing because everybody that they've tried to interview, they've gotten rejected for. So now I think the latest report was Mike Brown or Mike Malone. I really like Mike Brown and his fit with the Knicks because of what he was able to do in Sacramento with kind of that similar, like he had Fox and Sabonis. Now he has Brunson and Cat's a way better offensive talent than Sabonis. I think offensively he can really unlock this team going forward. And the Knicks are also going to have to really improve that bench and to see what they have in like Dadiet and Tyler Kolek and McCullough. But like they're going to obviously need to improve this bench no matter what head coach they go and get. But I do like Mike Brown because of his offensive ability and what he was able to do there in Sacramento, kind of really turning them around. I think he got the baddest shake as well out there. And even Mike Malone, I feel like brings that Tibbs intensity that I think New York just like has this like intensity and this kind of like aura about them that I think Mike Malone could really embrace. But the difference between Tibbs' intensity and Mike Malone's intensity, I think Mike Malone is very more using his depth and using his full team and really being able to make adjustments on the fly. And I think that's something that Tibbs has struggled with, especially with this specific team in New York. But I really am interested to see who becomes the next head coach because they've had so many rejections already. I would love either Mike Brown or Mike Malone. Those are kind of like the latest rumors I've heard. I think both have 2 different coaching styles that I think could fit this team for sure. But no matter what head coach they go get, the New York Knicks are going to have to go into this offseason looking to add and more talent to that bench and being able to trust the depth so you don't have to play Jalen Brunson 40 minutes a night, Karl-Anthony Towns 40 minutes a night. You don't have to play Mikal Bridges 43 minutes a night. So no matter what head coach they go get, and like I said, I like Mike Brown or Mike Malone, and that's looking like the direction it's going in. But no matter what the head coach is, they need to really improve that bench and get more depth on this team to push this team forward outside of just getting a new head coach. Because they can get a new head coach and not have the depth that they need going into next year. And it's kind of could be the same result that it was this year, even though they went to the conference finals. But Mike Brown, Mike Malone, I wouldn't be mad at either one of those signings. Now, for the last thing to kind of wrap it up, how much cap will Boston look to clear up this offseason? Fully expected Jrue Holiday trade. What's the value on somebody like Kristaps Porzingis? I've heard rumors about Boston trying to possibly move up in this year's draft, which I would be a big fan of them doing. They have 28 and 32. I think Jrue Holiday and somebody of his caliber can definitely net you a first-round pick to the right team this offseason. So looking at that, Boston moving up in the draft is something I would definitely like to see happen because I think they could definitely use a little bit more young talent on this team going forward. 28-32, interested to see where they go with those picks in the back half of the first round. Like, they could use a big because they're probably not going to bring back Luke Cornett. Kristaps Porzingis could be out the door, so like maybe a little bit too late. They might have to trade up for somebody like Thomas Sorber, Ryan Kalkbrenner, somebody they can get at the top of the second round. Like, somebody like Cam Jones could be somebody interesting. Like, they could just use a little bit more talent off that bench going forward. Even when you get Jason Tatum back, you still have Brown, Derek White. But I really do truly expect this team to look very differently going into next year. I think the only players that are safe is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I could see them moving Derek White. He is the perfect fitting piece, but if they were to make Derek White available, just seeing what Desmond Bane went for, I think it's interesting. I think you have to listen to all offers on Derek White, even though he's somebody that perfectly fits your team and your system and your scheme. This is a gap year. And if you can recoup on some picks that you've used to build this championship roster in the past, you have to take advantage of that. And I think Derek White is the avenue that they could use to get a package of like 2 or 3 first-round picks for what he gives you as a player. So if you're Boston going into this offseason, even if like it's a wide open Eastern Conference, I think Boston can still be very competitive depending on what route they take this offseason. But I think you can't leave a stone unturned. Like, you have to look at Drew Holiday trades, obviously, Kristaps Porzingis trades, obviously. I would listen to calls on Derek White. If somebody gives you a out of the absolute water package for Jaylen Brown, you have to listen to it as well, just because you're going to want to get under the second apron, and there's avenues for you to do that and also add some more draft capital and kind of reshape this roster around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for the future. But if you're Boston, you have to listen to all calls on everything going into this offseason. Interested to see what route they take, because I still think there's a world where Boston is good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference next year, even without Jason Tatum, because of how they play and depending on who they keep and who they get rid of and what they do this offseason. But the offseason is right around the corner. We're a week away. We're pretty much, unless the Pacers win tomorrow night, it could start basically tomorrow night. So for the offseason, draft is a week away. I will have my final NBA mock draft out this weekend. So that's all I have with kind of some rumors and a preview of what are the bigger storylines going into this offseason. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.